We're listening to an interview with Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, recorded in June, an interview with my guest, Bernie Kellman.
So things were looking up. By the end of that answer, I was regaining my courage. I regained my balance. So I stepped in it again. As David knows and my friend knows, despite my provincial Denver roots, I've traveled a tiny bit. I've hitchhiked from Helsinki to Lisbon, from San Francisco to South America. I speak 5 languages fluently and can find the toilet, the bar, and the on-ramp in about 10 more. I've worked in Germany and France and Spain. So I asked Ian a question and revealed myself as a stupid American.
The current tour seems to be going swimmingly well, sold-out shows. Jethro Tull fans, as usual, smugly congratulating themselves for having picked the right horse all those years ago, while our peers from high school and college try to celebrate their favorite bands dead in Detox or in Vegas, has been brought up so many times. And the critics are raving despite their pathological inability to avoid punning on living in the past and too old to rock and roll. There's been a lot of evening shows, Sunshine. Who do you see out in the audience? And how is it? Is there a contrast between the American audience and the international audience? A contrast between the Jethro Tull audience and solo audience?
Well, interesting you say a contrast between the American audience and the international audience, as if somehow the rest of the planet exists as a single state outside of North America, or a distant fringe state that you haven't quite got round to taking over yet. No, it's different in every country, and to even try to pin down a U.S. audience as opposed to a Canadian audience or a Central American audience or a South American audience, it is absolutely different in different places on different times of the year, depending on whether it's a traditional theatre, whether it's a concert hall, whether it's an outdoor summer sheds, as we call them, the outdoor amphitheatre circuit. I mean, it's always different. I don't think it's very useful to try and generalize about audiences, either based on a national stereotype or even a state by state or city by city stereotype. It doesn't quite work out that way. But if pressed, then I would say that there are some tendencies that do tend to crop up from time to time, and it's in terms of the demographics, then indoor shows in general, regardless of where they are in the world, will usually skew to an older demographic, people who are in their 50s or even into their 60s. Whereas if it's an outdoor show in the summer, it will, in the USA, still be skewed to an older audience, but outside of the USA and perhaps Canada, it will be a much younger audience outdoors in the summer. And if it's a standing audience as opposed to a seated audience, then it will skew even more to late teenage, early 20s. But there are always exceptions to the rule, like when I was in Brazil a few weeks ago, playing a couple of indoor venues in Sao Paulo and Rio that I played a few times before. It was remarkable how many young people, I mean late teens, early 20s, were in the audience and in the expensive tickets towards the front of the theatre, the front of the seated area. So, there are always contradictions, however tempting it is to come up with stereotypes regarding audiences. But generally speaking, indoors, the smarter, the more luxurious the concert hall, it will tend to be an older audience. Outdoors, it will tend to be a younger audience. And there are a lot of venues that I play and will be playing this summer in Europe where I will look out into the audience and all I will see is people, I suppose somewhere within a year or two of their early 20s. That's what I will see. There will be some older people there too, but they'll be at the back, closer to the portable toilets, because their bladders are not what they used to be.
I kind of put you in your place there with a question up front.
Well, I was reeling once again. That's the second time I was reeling. But I recovered. I took a deep breath. I recovered, and I threw Ian Anderson a curveball.
Aqualung was written probably in 1969, 1970. And there was a popular hit musical at the time, Fiddler on the Roof, which I'm sure you were aware of at the time. Mm-hmm. Any chance subconsciously, somewhere, somehow, the first 6 notes of If I Were a Rich Man are connected to the iconic riff of Aqualung, and you're welcome to hum them.
Well, if it's anywhere close, it would be kind of back to front, because the Aqualung riff is probably more informed by some of the simpler melodic lines of Ludwig van Beethoven than by whoever wrote Fiddler on the Roof. I'm afraid I can't help you on that one, but da-da-da-da-dum-dum is not quite the same as la-da-da-da-dum-dum, which is in a minor key, and there's a slightly different feel. So I don't really know. I'm usually pretty careful about that sort of thing, that I don't want to fall into that sad trap which befell poor George Harrison when he borrowed some lines from some Tamla Motown era for something he wrote, whatever it was, My Sweet Lord, was it, or something that... Anyway, it was the subject of a court case where he had to give all the money to somebody else, and kind of a bit of an embarrassment to be accused of plagiarism, even if it was an innocent moment of coincidence or just the inevitable subconscious awareness of so much music over so many years. But it's something I've always been a bit careful about, and it's these days a whole lot easier using modern technology to research carefully your musical and particularly your lyrical references. And in days gone by, I used to have to go to the Performing Rights Society and seek a written response to a request for searches on song titles. These days, a couple of minutes with Google, iTunes, and Amazon, will reveal all. So it's a whole lot easier these days to research song titles, and even if you're a young musician wanting to form a band, you can quickly find out if you've inadvertently chosen the name for your new band that's already registered in a bunch of other countries with a whole bunch of other bands under the same name. So these days, it's a little easier to be careful that you don't fall into that trap. And there are even note recognition software possibilities for checking out that you haven't inadvertently borrowed a key bit of music from somebody else. That is something that is increasing all the time. So I think anyone who's writing music these days is going to find it a whole lot easier to avoid the inevitable pitfalls and accusations that have hounded the likes of Andrew Lloyd Webber since he began. And of course, in the minds of most musicologists, Andrew Lloyd Webber is a bit of a pariah. He's a bit of he's out there on the edge, seemingly having borrowed and some would say stolen a lot of lines from a lot of other composers over the years, and carefully rearranged things to come up with his own memorable and very strong themes. I'm afraid I'm not qualified to comment on whether or not Lloyd Webber has a shred of originality in his soul and under his fingers, or whether he's actually quite a skillful and clever composer who just is somewhat wrongly accused. I really can't comment, but I know what the critics say.
Now, that was a fairly reasonable answer to what I have to say is kind of an unreasonable question. Really, sitting on a park bench, if I were a rich man. I mean, the phrasing is similar, the note lengths are similar, but, man, that was a reach, I got to tell you. But sometimes you have to ask a dumb question to get an interesting answer, and you did get an interesting answer.
Well, you and Ian Anderson are musicians. I'm a retired bike messenger, current social worker, so I thought it was a great question myself. The first time it was proposed to me that maybe Rich Man and Aqualung were related, I thought of it as a kind of flash of recognition. How could it not be that? But I live and learn. Things got better.